Today's guest is a leader forged in the depths of the ocean and sharpened by deep introspection. Commander William C. Spears is a U.S. Navy submarine warfare officer who has served as the second in command of a ballistic missile submarine and now works in the Pentagon. But beyond the high-stakes world of nuclear deterrence and military command, he is also a profound thinker and author of the forthcoming book, Stoicism as a Warrior Philosophy. His work explores how the ancient principles of Stoicism can guide the modern warrior, offering mental clarity, moral grounding, and emotional resilience. With over 2 decades of service since enlisting in 2001, Commander Spears brings a rare perspective on leadership, team performance under pressure, and the ethical dimensions of military life. He's also a father, and he'll be the first to tell you that's the most important title he holds. Please welcome Commander William C. Spears.
Hey, how's it going? I was totally not ready for that introduction, man. Oh man, that was awesome. Yeah. Makes me sound a lot cooler than I am. No, I enjoy doing them. I think it's important. Some people tune out to speaking or reading, and so I like to add a video storytelling part of it too. That hopefully one way or the other we're reaching people. Yeah, well, I'm really glad to be here, man. Like, I do love talking to just, folks from all over, and I get to learn so much about things I didn't know and people I didn't know doing this as well. So I really appreciate you having me on board. Absolutely, absolutely. So why don't we dive into a little bit of background? What brought you to the military? Okay, so the first thing I will say is I am active military. I'm still serving. I'm not retired, which that bakes in some certain obligations. I can't talk about certain things. I also it's necessary for me to point out that I'm just here speaking as William Spears. I'm not, I don't speak for the Navy or for the Department of War or any kind of any government organization. If I endorse some product or something, that's just my opinion. That's nothing to do with any government organization. That being said, so I joined the Navy basically right out of high school. I come from a small town in Louisiana, Pineville, Louisiana. And I graduated high school. Within about a week of that, I shipped out, and I was advised early on that hey, if you can put up with the BS of the military, then it can be a really good path to education and training and, upskilling and just growing up in life and everything. And man, they were right. Another thing I was advised was, hey, whenever you get in there, if they offer you school, you take it. You sign up for, you continuously will just sign up for the most technical and hardest thing that you can do, because that's where you're going to get the most skills that you can then use as leverage in real life, whether that's to stay in the military or to go out, grow up and get a real job, which I have yet to do yet. So I enlisted. Following that advice, I basically signed up for the nuclear power program within the Navy, where they basically train you to go be a technician on a carrier or a submarine working in the reactor plant. And so that's what I did. And while I was in school for that, I applied for every other school that I could, anything that came up. And so I, through some twist of fate, found myself at the Naval Academy there a couple of years later. I don't know why they accepted me, but they did. And so it has worked out brilliantly since then. I could not have had a better career than I've had. I ended up going back into nuclear power and submarines just because that out of, the nice thing about going to the academy is it's like a clean slate. You can go aviation or Marine Corps or, kind of any path you want from there, from being an enlisted guy. It's a completely, you can start completely over. Of course, I went right back into what was home for me, which was the nuclear power community and going into submarines. And I've had a great submarine career since then. I've did a couple of tours in fast attack submarines, all in the Western Pacific kind of area out of Pearl Harbor and Guam.
And after that, I did a executive officer tour on a ballistic missile submarine. That was a completely wild and different world from anything I'd experienced before. And now I'm in between ships, and I'm basically at the Pentagon looking at how expensive ships are. So I do count until until the Navy, gets tired of me being here and decides to send me back to sea again. So that's me. That's where I'm at, and that's kind of been a 20-year career.
Yeah, absolutely, man. This is very interesting. I think I've only had one other guest that was in the nuclear field, and I believe he was I carrier. He wasn't on a sub, but he had some interesting stuff to say as well. He was uh, lower listed. He first termer, then got out. But yeah, he had some interesting things to say about it. What was the first time he was on a sub? How do you explain the feeling of being on it and just being underwater and no sun? And
Yeah.
I mean, it's a different lifestyle.
It's busy is the thing that keeps you from spending too much time thinking about how powerless I am, and if you'll go crazy if you spend too much time thinking those kinds of things. But
Mhm.
the first thing that occurs to you, especially on the first time you're underway, and to be clear, I the first time I got underway, I'd been in the Navy for a long time. I'd just gone from school to school to school. My friends all make fun of me for it. You're going to another school? Like, yeah, I'm going to another school. You're a big waste of money. So, so, the so I had been in the Navy for, it had been like 8 years since I enlisted by the,
Mhm.
time that I actually made it to a ship because I just bounced from school to school. But finally there, it was very busy, and I was completely focused on just trying to do my job. And really, as soon as you show up to the ship, whether that's as a junior officer or a junior enlisted, it doesn't matter. No one's really uh gonna give you the time of day until you start learning the ship and you get what we call it getting qualified. And that is, you get this big binder full of just things you've got to go study and learn, and they're just signature blocks that basically you've got to talk to someone who is experienced in that system, or that procedure or whatever, and get them to sign off and say that yes, you are qualified on that. You understand the reactor coolant discharge system or whatever. And so as an officer, you're walking around, you're going up to like E5s and E6s and saying, hey, Petty Officer so you got time for a check out on this thing. And so, it creates this dynamic where uh, the submarine community really just as a culture doesn't really care about your rank nearly as much as it cares about what you know, and your knowledge and competence in the ship, and your ability to understand the ship. And that's just a function that is what makes sense in that environment.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's something that I really appreciate, and I recognize that. And that's kind of what attracted me back into the nuclear power world. Once I kind of got out of it, had the ability to go in all these different directions. And I really liked that culture. And it's definitely not for everybody, but I really did appreciate that aspect of the culture where I show up as a junior officer, and petty officer so and so says, "Okay, sir. Well, I will call you sir and obey all the protocols and all the things. I'll salute you if we pass each other on the pier, but I'll be interested in what you have to say once you're qualified." And that's kind of how it goes. And that's not absolutely true. If I say, hey, my division, hey chief, we need to have the guys do this and that. Chief's gonna
right.
Roger up, and he's gonna, but he might take me behind a closed door and say, oh, "Hey, sir, all right, I know you said this, but this is what I think you meant." And if I have any sense at all, I'm going to say, "You know what, Chief, you're right. That is what I meant." And that's how it goes. And the reality is the system is just too complex for us to have any kind of dynamic where I'm going to go in and puff up my chest and say I'm in charge, and you're going to listen to me just because I'm wearing this rank on my collar. Like, no one cares. They give you a golf clap for whatever rank you show. You need to get qualified and have the basically what happens is you get enough signatures that the command as a whole says, okay, you are competent enough to stand this watch where you are in charge of these operators. And so like the first watch you stand as a uh, officer, as a junior officer, is what's called engineering officer of the watch. And that is the person. It looks like, if you think of Scotty or Geordi from Star Trek, the guy back in the engine room, and I've got a bunch of operators running around in the engine room, and I've got a bunch of operators in front of me at the reactor point control panel and stuff like that. And I'm the guy that's behind them. I don't touch anything. If I do touch anything, I'm going to get my hand slapped away. I basically say, reactor operator, do this, electrical operator, do that. And they are trained to, if I give them a foolish order that would violate reactor safety, that they're trained to say, sir, that violates reactor safety. I'm not going to. And that's our environment, and that's what makes sense. It's not a, hey, go charge this hill and go do it, just no matter what, because some officer said. It's a different environment. That's just the technical dynamic that we have. And you learn very quickly that knowledge is power in a submarine, and once you come to understand what you're doing and develop those dynamics, and develop that basically consciousness of how to get the most out of a watch team. That's how you learn how to lead on a submarine. And I really like that culture. I like that aspect of it.
Yeah, it sounds really familiar to the Army side, the soft community. In the special operations side, that's exactly how it's done. Your respect is based off your knowledge and your ability to make confident decisions, not so much your rank, right? And that's the exact opposite of that in the regular. The fool can lead.
Okay.
And his rank is going to decide what's going to happen. I've been on both sides. I agree. That atmosphere, you know, having to earn the respect and having to not just earn the respect of your rank, but earn your respect of your decision by your peers is based off of your competency, not just what you're wearing. And I agree. That's the best way. I wish the whole military was like that, because that is the best way to strengthen your military. It's got the peer pressure alone makes you become a better person.
It definitely does a lot for your development as an individual and the development of the team. And that's one of the things that I try to, when I'm mentoring junior officers now that I'm higher up, I've got some more experience. And the thing that I'm always trying to communicate and always trying to drive on is that it is not about you. You need to be smart and understand the systems. You need to have those procedures memorized. But that's just your ticket to the show. That's not how you add value. The way you add value is to extract as much intellectual firepower as possible out of that watch team. And it's the team that's going to make you successful. And it's the team that's going to deliver the ship, and deliver the payload. And it's not going to be you. And you have to completely distance yourself from whatever you thought you were going to be as far as being a star. The sooner you can detach from that silliness and those petty concerns of your own vanity, the sooner you can really extract value out of a watch team. And so that dynamic, I think, is really, it's beneficial to everyone involved in it. And so whenever I'm driving the ship, and that what we call driving the ship as an officer is being the guy who's standing there barking orders saying, left full rudder, steady course, 127, dive, make your depth, whatever feet. I'm giving orders and the team is executing all these things. But one of the things that you want to cultivate is this sense that everyone should be feeding up recommendations. The quartermaster is going to say, hey, sir, there's a navigational hazard, X number of yards down track. I recommend this course instead. My sonar operator is going to say, hey, sir, if we maneuver the ship in this way, I will receive these signals on a better sensor, and I'll have a better way of, distinguishing, the fidelity of the bearing that this thing I'm tracking is down. And the fire control technician is going to say, I'll be able to refine the solution better if we drive this many, degrees of true bearing to this contact. And those different recommendations
feed in, and as an officer, you're supposed to synthesize them, and then you give an order to what it is. I want every individual in that watch team to believe that he is the one. If every one of those things, those guys believes that he's the only one that knows what's going on, or he has the best sense of the picture, he's going to feed the best recommendations. He's also going to feel the responsibility to he can't drop the pat, and just let the rest of the watch team carry him. He's got to think like my recommendations here are driving the ship, and if I screw it up, the ship's going to crash. And they're right. And the more that they understand and have that sense of responsibility, the better they're going to perform, and the more satisfied they're going to be in their performance. And so that's an important leadership dynamic that we try to cultivate. You'll find some officers that will, receive a recommendation and blow it off, or will receive a recommendation and, the sonar operator will say, recommend coming to course 125, and the officer will say, left full rudder steady course 120. And just pick something different just so he doesn't look like he's being puppeted by the watch team. I don't care if the watch team thinks I'm a puppet. That's fine. Like let them feel the responsibility, and that way they're just going to perform.
Yeah, I agree 100%. But that's the difference between the civilian world and the military. Every position got its moments of high stress. No matter what you're doing, there's high stress moments, and that's when it seems like veterans tend to strive. They do extremely well in those kind of situations. And the weight of other people's lives playing, makes that difference. So when you came from off the ship, and let's say, and you went back to stateside, you said right now you're working at the Pentagon, just in between waiting for another ship to go to. Is that what you said you was doing?
Yeah, that's the idea. So the kind of Navy cycle is you'll spend a few years attached to a ship, and while you're attached to that ship, the ship will be in port some of the time, and it'll be at sea some of the time. And when it's in port, you're working your butt off because the ship is just a huge maintenance nightmare, and you got to tear everything apart, put it back together. So if you're a technician, you're doing the wrench turning and doing all that stuff. If you're an officer, you're basically an engineering manager. You're looking at Gantt charts and schedules and managing personnel paperwork and all that kind of stuff. But all of it, you're busy. And then so you'll get assigned to a shore duty assignment every now and then. That's kind of an opportunity to recharge your batteries a little bit, but you're still working. You're doing a job just in some office somewhere, or you're going to school. I basically, every time they've offered me to go to school, I'm like, yep, I will go. I will always go to more school. And as a result of, my friends say I'm a huge waste of money. So, but right now, my job is I'm at the Pentagon, and I just really what the Pentagon is. People think that the Pentagon is like, people moving around pieces on a chessboard and deciding where ships and airplanes go. It's not that. That all happens elsewhere mainly. I mean, there's a little bit of that happening at the Pentagon, but most of that is happening in other buildings and other places around the world. The Pentagon is all about money. It's all about developing what the services are going to invest in. If we're going to buy more things we can have tomorrow versus we're going to buy more things that we can have 10 years from now, or we're going to invest in more research for stuff that might never pan out. I don't know. So it's all those little trade-off decisions, and we influence all those. And so I work in an office of a bunch of civilian, like PhD, just brilliant people, and I'm one of the random uniforms that's sprinkled around. I'm the submarine guy that occasionally says, "Hey, submarines don't work like that," and we tee up the decisions that go up to various guys in ties to make those decisions and decide what we're going to buy. But it's a real Byzantine, complicated cycle. It's a really good experience for me to kind of see how it all works. But I'm eager to get back to a ship. If I go back to a ship, it'll be as a captain. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. Like there's a billion different reasons that could not happen in between now and then. So you don't count your chickens till they're hatched. But I expect the Navy to want me to come back and row again at some point.
Yeah, and it's real similar to that in Arkansas, as far as, you have two types of NCOs. You got your field NCOs that just scribe and drive out in the field, and they're miserable when they're back home and not constantly out there training troops and doing what we're supposed to be doing. And then you got the other kind, that's the garrison guys that do not like being out in the field. They prefer to be back in garrison and doing the day-to-day stuff there. And it's really kind of unique how that system plays out. It kind of complements because you've got the best at both sides. And it kind of sounds the same here. You're getting experiences at the Pentagon that you would never get from anywhere else. And then you got your field side, submarine, and you're learning the tactical side, and that sounds like where your passion is, and that's where you thrive. But either way, you're still getting knowledge and training and experience that's going to play in both parts.
Yeah, one of the things that's been really valuable about that experience is that just you find out that people are people everywhere, and you intuitively know that, but when you're out there, you don't feel that way, and it's just kind of like going from enlisted to officer. When I was an enlisted guy, like these dang officers, they think they know so much, they're so arrogant, they don't know anything, and then you become an officer, and you're just trying your best to do the job and make everyone successful, but you're, as a junior officer, you're looking at these senior officers, and they're completely detached from reality. They have unreasonable expectations, and then you find yourself as a senior officer, and you're just trying your best. And these knucklehead JOs all think they know what's up, and think that they can judge your decisions, and they don't know anything. And but the ones you really hate whenever you're at that level is bastards at the Pentagon that are not resourcing this thing that is really important to me. And then you get to the Pentagon and you realize it's just a bunch of human beings who are responding to the incentives that they have in front of them, trying to do their job the best they can. And this idea of this, fat, lazy Govey that is just sitting there not accomplishing anything and is content and his, on pointless job is just not real. And or this idea of the nefarious politicals and everything, but they're really, you might have a nefarious actor somewhere in there. I don't know. I haven't encountered them. Everyone that I've encountered are patriotic. They're trying to do the best they can. They really, really believe deeply in this country, and they could all do much better somewhere else. But they're proud to be doing jobs and making decisions or influencing decisions that matter. They would much rather influence a decision that's gonna get the warfighter into barracks without mold than influence some decision over what brand of sugar water is making the most money. Like they don't they're not satisfied by money. They're satisfied by making decisions that matter. And I think that that's largely lost on all the stereotypes about DC.
Yeah, I mean, there's departments for everything, and that's where a lot of people feel. You see it within our people's demographics as far as what they reasons why they vote for who. You've got the academic guys that think that firearms are the most important things in the world, and all the other stuff that's in the fields and stuff that's running the country and keeping the country safe. That all gets discarded. Nobody even pays attention to that because it's what I want, not what is good.
Yeah. It's what is my priority right now.
Yep.
And that's human nature. And people are going to behave that way. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, the other parts of this is like people don't comprehend how much goes into the decision-making process, right? How many channels does it go all the way up to before somebody says that submarine is going to go to that place, that location? That's not a decision that's made in a next to a water cooler somewhere. Those are high powered decisions that we accomplish every day as veterans and any military, Marines, doesn't matter. All those same types of decisions have these long channels that they have to go to, and everybody plays that part in that.
And I'll be the first to say that it's too complicated. I will be the first to say that it's not ideal how many levels of bureaucracy, any given decision has to go through. But what I will say is that everyone knows that. And every generation that comes into power thinks that they're the first ones to notice that. And they're the ones that are going to cut through all the red tape. We've been saying that for hundreds of years. Like that's the nature of the business. And there's this big like mystery out there, this big myth that the war fighters are out there war fighting, and then it's the bastard bureaucrats that are the problem with everything. And you're either a warrior or a bureaucrat. What is lost in that myth is that bureaucracy is a military impulse. It is the most military impulse. What it is, the reason that you have all these rules and regulations and chains and all this crap that every decision has to go through multiple levels is because military people like to impose control over things. And whenever you're in charge of a large organization, how do you impose control? You install more rules. You write rules, you write regulations, and you create staffs, and those staffs, grow, and it just grows like weeds but it's this natural impulse that that organizations have to grow. And it's not because people are nefarious and are just trying to be obstructionists. It's because people are trying to impose rules on chaos in the way that they know how, which is to just create more rules, and you end up with these giant processes that are just unwieldy and take too long to accomplish the simplest thing, and it's very frustrating. And the only I don't have a good solution for it, but what I have found is just leadership. It's a leadership challenge to come into a situation, whatever it is, you recognize, okay, this is my sphere of influence, and just cut as much of that process out as you can. And so I've kind of got a reputation for slash and burn. Whenever I come to a ship, every ship that I've come to has just, years and years of growth of instructions of this is how this ship is going to do this process. And no one reads it. It's just crap. It's on the books. Just delete it. Just get rid of it. Like, oh, we can't do that. How will we know what our process is for the urinalysis program on the ship? I'm like, you're going to follow the fleet instruction. Like, just get rid of it. Like, no one's reading it anyway. And I think that you need to just have and inculcate that impulse into leaders at all levels. That's the only way you're going to do it. It's only going to be from the bottom up. And it just requires a cultural appreciation for expediency and process, and cutting out the unnecessary levels of bureaucracy. Anyway, that wasn't what this podcast episode was supposed to be about, but now you have my philosophy on bureaucracy.
Well, let me ask you this. I'm a big proponent of mental health, and I've got lots of friends that are struggling, and a lot of listeners that are struggling. When you're up there working, how often do you hear people talking about creating programs, not for our veterans, not for the ones that are out that are already struggling, but creating programs for our active duty and reserve components prior to combat and prior to high stress situations, getting some kind of mental resiliency training going to help them get through that. And when they come back, have less issues and harder issues to fix.
Yeah. I hear about programs constantly. I manage such programs constantly, but it's never been one that I've been a big fan of. In execution, what it has ended up being, in my experience, is largely an extra thing that I've got to manage. Like, okay, now I've got to name a command resiliency team, and I've got to, we're going to do some extra training, and it always ends up feeling like this extra kind of burden, because they're not going to take something off of my workload. As an officer, what I basically have to do when I get this new, you're going to get this new program. Then the Navy has come up with this new, and they'll always have a cute, acronym for it or whatever. Every time we try this, and it's, you say, okay, all right, who's my guy I'm going to put in charge of this? How are we going to get some value out of this thing that has landed on the desk when none of my other workload has been taken away. What I have found in my personal experience is that I have gotten a lot better results in terms of decreasing the issues of people disappearing into the mental health, complex, not by angelic application of those programs that have been imposed, but instead by focusing on the culture within the ship. And so it
Absolutely.
a bottom up, basically a bottom up approach. And I think that I've gotten a lot, and this is all anecdotal, right? I can't prove any of this with statistics because I just don't have the sample size to do it. But this does check with my intuitions and just human nature, and dealing with humans is what I've been good at. Uh,
Right.
Basically, every time when I was the XO, every time someone that would check into the ship, particularly someone at a leadership level at like the middle management level, I'd say like, okay, we've gone through all these things, we've talked about all these things. If you have a sailor with mental health issues, here's the different channels that we send them to and how we deal with counseling and all that. But anyway, okay, all that. Hey, listen, don't be a dick. All right. How about like just don't be a dick? And let's go with that. And that's something that everyone can get on board with. Okay. Like you're a good dude, right? Be a good dude. Be a good dude to your sailors. And don't yell at them. And you know what? They're gonna do knuckleheaded things. They're gonna be late. They're gonna make excuses. They're gonna do all kinds of. They're gonna fail to meet your expectations over and over and over again. Don't be a dick. Okay. And there's a lot more to it than just being a good dude. Whenever you look under the hood of human performance, you realize I can reduce anyone, given a sufficient power differential between any grown man and any other grown man. Anyone can make another grown man cry. Okay, I can reduce anyone if I have enough power over that person. That's not an accomplishment, is what I'm saying.
Right.
That doesn't say anything good about it. That's just human nature being what it is. What takes a good leader is someone who can do the opposite and can build people up. And it may not be with hugs and telling them that they did a good job when they didn't. Like different things work for different people, but leaders need to be able to understand the dynamics they're working with and recognize that different things work for different people. But generally, just having an attitude, just being a dick is going to be negative to all. It's going to stay a huge negative human performance thing, that where if people feel like they're going to come into work and they're just going to get treated poorly, they're just, it may not be that someone's yelling at them. It may just be that they're just a dick.
Yeah.
If my boss is a jerk to me every day, I'm going to perform poorly because I'm gonna struggle to get on my car in the morning because I'm gonna have to psych myself up to just get down to the ship and go do my job. And I'm not gonna want to give reports to my boss if I'm gonna get my head bit off. If they're gonna just act like they smell crap when I walk in the room, I'm going to perform more poorly than I would otherwise. So you extract a lot of human performance out of just cultivating a culture that does not accept that kind of treating people, you know. And the thing is you just have to accept that you're never going to be able to measure that performance, and that's just a hard thing for engineering types and military type. Like, oh, I've got to have metrics. I've got to be able to measure the ability, and if I can't measure it, it's not real. Like, I'm sorry, this is the way life is, and human beings have a lot of performance characteristics that are unmeasurable. You just have to deal with your basic intuitions of I'm going to be a good dude, and then go on from there. And I'm telling you, everything's going to work better.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. And some of that was some of the advice that I gave my lower enlisted NCOs. The ones that you see, they all go through their phases, right? When they first put on the stripes, they're not 100% sure what to do. And then once they kind of get the hang of it, then their head blows up, and then they go to the other side. Now they're overly strict and constantly yelling at people. And you've got to reel them in until they find that middle ground of what works for them for their leadership style. And I try to always explain to the guys, you need to understand the guys that you are belittling and tearing into their asses every day in the garrison. When we get over the sandbox, it's going to have 5 rounds. And you just need to remember that the things you're doing here may carry over. And you push somebody to those limits. I've seen it happen. We've had an NCO that got killed over yelling at a soldier for MRE wrappers underneath his bed, and um, it ended very, very sadly. The other thing I tell them is it's not, it's not the subordinate's responsibility to change how he learns. It's the leader's responsibility to change how he teaches and his leadership style to match his subordinate. And that varies. You're gonna have some guys where you can ask kindly to do things, they're gonna blow you off the back. And you have to be a little bit stricter with those guys. And then you've got the other ones where if your voice raises too much, they clam up and they don't want to do anything because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble. At the end of the day, a subordinate, the definition of a subordinate is the direct reflection of its leader. And how you put in it is what you're going to get out of it. If you put shit in, you're going to get shit out.
Yeah.
And that's what happens.
And that's a matter of personal effort, and personal discipline of the leader is recognizing that, like, nope, I actually have to do this thing that is maybe a little bit out of my comfort zone.
Yep.
And sometimes I'll tell you, for me, like, I like to be a nice guy, and sometimes that's not the right answer.
100%.
And so, sometimes, you got to hold someone accountable. And that was a big growing point for me as a leader, kind of growing up, is realizing that, as a junior officer, I just kind of thought leadership is social skill. And as long as I'm good with everybody, everyone's going to do well and everything's going to go well. But I eventually reached a level where that was not working anymore. And some people needed me to be mad at them sometimes, but
Yeah.
and part of that was realizing that if my department is not functioning well, everyone suffers and everyone's quality of life suffers because we're not performing.
Yep.
And if we're not performing our mission, then we're not going to have good morale. And that's kind of an important understanding of what morale is. Morale is not just being happy, or
Right.
content or being comfortable. That's not morale. That's something else. It has to do with my ability as a unit, as a collective, as a group of people to cohere and perform a certain mission and achieve it. And the easiest way to sum it up is no losing team ever has good morale. They might have some things, but morale isn't it.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree 100%. And I know I want to dig into your book that's coming out, because I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, but what was the inspiration for your book? Where did this come from?
Yeah. Okay. So the book is it's called Stoicism as a Warrior Philosophy. It is exactly as weird as it sounds, but it is the philosophy of Stoicism as applied to the military service. But it is. I will first of all just warn everyone: the book is not for everybody. It's kind of dense. It's a heavy read. It's not like a light, baby's first Stoicism book. It's more like I read something by Ryan Holiday or Donald Robertson or something like that, and I want to know more. And it's like, okay, you want to know more? Here you go. This goes all the way down the rabbit hole of what does Stoicism mean and how does it apply to the military service. What inspired me to write it? I got into Stoicism while I was at the Naval Academy. There's a kind of a underground. It has a big presence within the Naval Academy as a result of a particular admiral who was a war hero in the Vietnam War. He was a Medal of Honor winner for his leadership while he was a prisoner of war. And he wrote a lot about how Stoicism and the philosophy of the Stoics helped him to basically maintain his honor and resilience while he was in this torture camp. And so that kind of is within the undercurrent of the culture at the Naval Academy. I got really into it then, and then I went on into my submarine career. And then in like the 2010s, Stoicism like exploded on the internet as this popular thing. There's like every other day there's a Stoic blog coming out, and every month there's a new Stoic book coming out, and it's all this kind of like really surface treatment of it. And there were some people out there who said, like, well, if you really read the Stoics, the military abuses Stoicism and tries to turn it into, tries to militarize it. And if you really read them, you would know that they would all be, perfectly in alignment with my political views. And what are you talking about? Marcus Aurelius is like writing from the battlefield. Yeah, yeah. Like, let's be real here. Who's imposing their political beliefs on this philosophy? And so I wanted to answer the question of how does the morality of warfare look through the lens of Stoic morality? And I'm a huge nerd for this stuff. So I don't know if you've picked up on that, but I think I just am a huge nerd for philosophy. And so I said, all right, well, I'm going to treat this from a scholarly and research kind of angle. I'm going to follow this rabbit hole all the way down to the bottom and see what the book actually says, because that's really what our philosophy is on a submarine, and kind of our culture is. I'm going to care about your opinion eventually after we know what the book says. Bring me the book. Let's see the tech manual. Like, okay, you say that, we should start up the reactor in this procedure and this way, or take this shortcut. Like, nope, what does the procedure say? We're going to follow it. And that's just, it makes sense, right? That's what everything is technical. Everything is reference based. So I said, all right, let's take a reference-based approach to Stoicism and see what the ancient philosophers actually had to say about these things. Where did they disagree? Let's get it all laid out. And then, then let's make some inferencing and apply to our common day and see what we think about it. And so that's kind of the basic idea of the book.
So let me ask you this. I've wrote 2 books now. One's in the process at Prec right now. And I struggled with both. When you first write your first book, I don't know if this is your first one or not, but what I discovered is it's nowhere near as easy as you think. So even if you're writing about yourself, you're not going to expect what you're going to go through. And just the editing process alone. And I struggled with both of them, getting through all those processes. What did you find hard about your book?
The biggest surprise, like I thoroughly enjoyed doing the research and the writing and doing the scholarship stuff. And like, if I had a second life to live and I didn't have to make money, I would have maybe I would have enjoyed being a philosopher, being an academic, being a college professor or something like that. But no one's going to pay me to do that. And the world is saturated with people who have philosophy degrees and can't get a job with using that degree. And like, I didn't need that. I came out of a small town in Louisiana. No one was going to pay me to go to school for that. So I went to school for whatever the Navy would send me to school for. And I'm very happy with that outcome. What I found most surprising and kind of the biggest challenge was at the end of the process. I didn't really understand how the publishing world worked. I thought that you write your book, and like, once you've got the book put together, you're done. And then now you just find a publisher, and the publishers are all happy that, oh, I'm so glad you wrote this book. We'd love to publish that. Like, nope, it does not work like that at all.
Yeah.
And the publishers are completely saturated with clowns like me who have written books and think that someone's going to want to publish it. And I basically wrote the whole thing expecting this one publisher to accept it and be happy with it. And whenever they didn't, I was like, shit, I'm out of luck, man. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was ready to self-publish the thing, but I ended up finding, just through a really lucky break, finding a military history publisher that loved it. And so, and they're operating in the US and the UK. And so the book's going to be released on 2 continents. And it was just a better deal than I would have gotten with the publisher I'm going for anyway. So I am extremely lucky,
Yeah.
And the other thing I didn't know is that publishers don't like anything weird. If they don't know exactly what shelf to put it on, they're just like, I don't want to fool with that. Like, it should fall into a category. Those categories exist because they sell books. And so if it's like on a seam somewhere, which mine is like, is it military? Is it philosophy? Like, it's all those things. And, so it kind of sits on those seams. It's a weird book in that respect. And I'm just really, really glad and really lucky that I found a publisher. But if I would have known how hard it was going to be, I might not have written the book. If I would have known what kind of chance I was taking, because I gave this many, many years. And so that was a big surprise.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of books out there that never get finished for that exact reason. They get into it and they say, "Holy crap! I just thought I was going to spend a few hours writing some words down, edit some grammar, and ship it on out, and make millions."
That's no. And the thing is, it's even now, even having been successful in finding a publisher, I'm not going to make any money off of this.
Nope.
No one makes money selling books. Like even the really successful authors and people that make a living doing it, the way that they make their living is doing all these public speaking gigs and all this.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
all the different little like social media ecosystem crap that I'm like, I don't know. I drive ships. I'm not going to do anything with that. I wanted to contribute an argument and basically to put this together and say like, okay, Admiral, you wanted to know what Stoicism is? Here you go. Here's the book. And that's basically it. Like I've donated all the money that I like, the hundreds of dollars that I've made in advances so far has gone to military or veterans charities. Like I'm just not about the money.
Yeah, and that my first book was about about the things I never told my family in the military. It was called Echoes of War, and I never explained to my family the things that I went through, and so therefore they had no context of what happened from the guy I used to be to the guy that I became. And I wrote this as a document for my family. I wasn't going to publish it, and my daughter asked me to publish it. And when I did, I always told everybody, if you want to find my book, it's at every pharmacy next to the melatonin. And I just kind of figured, nobody'd really be interested in my story. It was more just context for my family. And surprisingly, people did like it. It did well for a while on Amazon. And I guess fortunately that, gave me the ability to decide to continue to keep writing because I do enjoy it. I do like blogging. I used to write for a better magazine that isn't published anymore, and not because of my articles.
It's a very transformative process, and like even if no one read your book, which it's great that people have found value in it, it would still be a contribution. Your family, you're going to have grandkids, you're going to have descendants long after your worms, and that's going to be what's left. And that's gonna be the record that you were here.
Yeah.
And so that's valuable. Make it a good record,
Yeah.
But the process itself, the transformative process itself of like clarifying your ideas. There's so much that I didn't know. I felt like just from the standpoint of understanding Stoic philosophy, like I thought I got it. And I totally didn't get it. There are so many more layers than the kind of surface understanding that is out there, and that I had, kind of thought I grasped and everything. But digging into it, doing the research, like I learned, 10 times what I thought I understood, and then from there, but also the process of clarifying. Okay, well, what do I actually think about this? What are my values? What is the priority for me? And getting all that out on paper, it looks differently than what's rattling around in your head. And what's rattling around in your head might be ideas that come into conflict. That is what philosophy really is. Philosophy is the exercise of saying, what do you believe? Are you sure? And why? And when you get into that why, you find that like, well, I think this over here because I really feel it in my gut, and I think this over here because that's what I grew up with. And those two things might not conflict or might not comport. They might not agree. And so something's wrong. And I might be living a lie at some level or deceiving myself in some way, thinking that I'm doing right when in fact I'm doing wrong, or I'm just rationalizing my way of going about things. And in a lot of ways, for me at least, it going through that exercise has really reinforced a lot of the things that I believe. And I found that like, nope, I really do believe that this is a good country. I really do believe that I should do my duty, and I believe that there are good reasons for that. I don't believe that I am doing my duty because I'm just being manipulated by some nefarious actor. No, I've thought about this. I did the reading, And this is, I came to the conclusion that this is fundamentally a good country with a good people, and we've got a job to do, and we're going to get through it. We're going to do it.
Yeah.
And having gone through those processes caused me to, become a better person in all the ways that matter. Has made me a better father, as well as a better warfighter. And those two things work together well once you have worked out all the little conflicts and all the little ways that I thought about something, but I just hadn't given it enough effort. So I highly recommend the philosophical process to people like that. Just going through and figuring out what you actually think and why you think it is just indispensable, or at least it has been for me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the third book I'm writing is more like a white paper, right? It's my thoughts and philosophy on how some of the mental health preparation can change in our military, and I've learned things already just by starting the research, things that I thought, and as I got into it, I see why we're not doing it that way now. It's because of this or that or whatever, and as you get that research, it does kind of help develop your thought process so that when you do get to the end of it, you have a strong believing and reasonable ground to stand on why you went this direction. And I think that's important. Not to mention what you said earlier. The most important part is that you're documenting your story in your voice, because nobody knows 30 years from now what the world's going to teach about our war or what the people are going to think or any of that stuff. And you only imagine what the difference would have been when we were tearing down statues and renaming bases and everything, if during that time frame that we were upset about, if they had the internet, to where we could have heard their story, heard their voice, understood their reasoning for what they did, and learned from it. And I think we're fortunate to be in the time that we're in now and be able to do that for the future.
Yeah, you and me, what we're doing is we're creating a record. That is going to be here long after our foolish bodies are gone. Now, but the mental health and preparation thing, this is an interesting point that I think that you would find compelling about Stoicism, that I think is undersold in the kind of popular discourse on it. And as part of my reason for thinking that it deserves a bigger place within military culture than it currently has, even though it already has a place in military culture, always has. The reason it's always had a place in military culture is because the military likes to be resilient, likes to be strong, likes to be brave, and likes to focus on what matters and do the job. And Stoicism comports with all those things and makes all those things work better. What is less understood is the interplay with mental health, and specifically mental health treatment. So now, not all of your listeners will necessarily be familiar with this, but whenever you go to you have a mental health issue, you go to the medical system, you're going to get some combination of psychiatry and psychology, some psychotherapy writ large is going to encompass sometimes a medical approach that involves drugs, antidepressants, this and that. But also kind of the much bigger piece of it for more people, and not everyone needs the pharmacological aspect or treatment. What a lot of people just need is what's called cognitive behavioral therapy, that's where we're going to talk through the way we think about things. We're going to isolate our emotions and our fears, our thoughts, and say, okay, what is the underlying belief that's causing me to think that? Let's isolate that and give it a name and figure it out. We're going to practice these mitigations and these interventions, and they're going to teach me some techniques that I can apply and carry with me, so I don't need to go through therapy for the rest of my life, or that whenever I'm in the situation somewhere, I can better manage my, anger, fear, or anxiety, whatever it is.
Right.
Well, what is very interesting and is not very well talked about in the popular Stoicism discourse is that cognitive behavioral therapy kind of came into being in the 20th century, but the people who developed it were deeply read in philosophy, specifically Stoic philosophy. And what they did is they basically applied and adapted a bunch of techniques that the Stoics used in the way that they think about just the information that they're receiving every day, and the way that they think their thoughts. They adapted those and turned them into therapeutic practices, and the what I'm not saying is that modern psychologists are just doing stoicism. It's not that. It's more like stoicism is kind of more like a natural cure that was figured out uh, thousands of years ago just because it worked. And psychology is, psychologists and psychotherapists are doing what's in a refined, a process that is refined and based off those techniques through evidence and trial and error, and it's continuing to get developed. It's a lot more refined and modernized process, but the underlying, ideas are thousands of years old. And it worked. The analogy is kind of like we understood that you could cure a headache by chewing on the bark of a willow tree before we knew that that bark contains salicylic acid, which you can turn into aspirin or synthesize as aspirin.
Right.
We understood it worked before we understood why it worked, and
Right.
and we knew how to make wine before we ever had heard of a microscope and understood how fermentation works. We just knew it worked.
Yep.
So the my thought on Stoicism as a growing popular trend is that it's a very positive development. And I don't necessarily think, I don't know how the military could, I just don't recommend that we incorporate it in the military training. Like maybe we could, like, I'm not the guy to tell you how to do that. I just feel like we would screw it up. I feel like we'd find a way to put a reflective belt on it. It's wow. I mean, am I right? Yeah.
You 100% correct.
Yeah. So that's just kind of my thought on that. But I think that as a underground thing, it's a very positive thing. I think it's a very positive development. And I think that the reason that it is has just blown up in popularity in the last 20 years is not because people suddenly discovered it, because it's always been there. Like people have been studying it for thousands of years. It's like a fundamental, like philosophy 101. Like you're going to learn the Stoics, then you're going to learn Aristotle and everything. It's not new, But what is new is how corrosive the mental health environment is right now. So you have growing suicide rates year over year. You have growing rates of depression, PTSD, all the things. You have now PTSD. You have things like war are definitely like the driving factor on that, and that's not necessarily part of the environment that I'm talking about right now. That's a separate thing, but it feeds into each other. Now you've got PTSD, and now you come back into the same environment where all of my spaces where people have hung out and around the campfires and the things that we have done since there were campfires has all gone away and been replaced with social media. And that we don't interact like human beings anymore. We largely interact with this fake, synthesized thing that's just made to. It's like developed in a laboratory specifically to piss me off and increase my anxiety. And of course, people are unhealthy. People are sick, and so they have found this thing that is an ancient philosophy and the ancientness of it resonates with some people, but the practices that it teaches, people are finding it helps them stay sane, and it helps them to keep their act together and to be able to function better. And so my argument is not necessarily that the military should take this thing, put a reflective belt on it, and somehow figure out how to make it training for everyone. We would mess that up, but that the military should note it and say, like, okay, that's a good development. Maybe create space for it, and let it be a thing, pass around the books, let it be part of the culture from a bottom up perspective. But if we had, imagine this, imagine you're a general, at the Pentagon, and you go out into Crystal City, these glittering skyscrapers that are all owned by defense contractors in the vicinity, and you go to a lab, and this guy says, "Hey, I've got this pill that's gonna increase. It's like a vaccine for depression, you know, uh, and it increases resilience. It's not a curative, but it's a preventive that increases resistance to all these issues, you know. And of course, you would be interested in that. But then they say, well, over here, I've got this shot also that is a discipline booster. It increases the ability to regulate impulses and the ability to, you know, whether that's, you know, in battle or whether that's just my ability to pass up that extra ding dong in the chow line, you know, that might help with your fitness issue that I noticed, you know. Of course, you would be interested in that. And then they said, well, over here, I've got this other thing, this ethicality booster that when I give them this shot, they're going to be better at, you know, not lying and not accepting bribes, or maybe not committing war crimes, what have you. Well, what if these things all work together and we're in the same package? And that's kind of what we're talking about here. And so I think that that package is as a natural organic development that was not anyone's effort, you know, it was not some government program, it was something people just figured out on their own, I think is a very good development. And that's kind of what I'm after exploring.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. And, you know, I'm not the lobby guy. I don't know much about government and politics and all that stuff. But if I stood on the steps of the White House chanting, nobody's going to listen to anything I got to say other than the police that are probably putting cuffs on. But, you know, that's not my intent is to focus on trying to make that change, but to make the awareness, you know, give people the option. You have the choice to go to the gym or not to go to the gym, and those consequences you deal with later. But that's my intent behind it. I just believe that there is some things that are happening in the civilian sector that can help, especially in you get into the elite areas of sports psychology and performance. The soft communities use them, SEALs and SF and all those guys. It just does not make it down to the line. And I think sharing those techniques and you know, making people awareness of how they work and what they work is a great thing. So that's the project I'm working on. I want to end the show on a fun note, right? Okay. And it's going to be interesting. I think I know where you're going to go with it, but we'll see. If you could sit down and have dinner with one person and have a conversation, alive or dead, it doesn't matter, who would that person be?
I wasn't ready for this, listeners. Just so you know, this was totally sprung on me. I would have to pick my hero, Vice Admiral James Stockdale.
Okay.
So Stockdale, you know, his story is very remarkable. Basically, the guy was a fighter pilot who was shot down. He also happened to be the carrier air group commander who was flying missions, as you know, air commanders do. And he was flying a mission over North Vietnam, was shot down, and was immediately the senior person in the prison camp. He basically spent 7 years there, and what he did was immediately recognize the situation, say, I have no control over the fact that I'm in prison here, but I do have control over my own actions, and was just an extremely resilient example for the rest of the prisoners who were there. And they were in solitary confinement, but they could communicate through tap codes, through tapping through the walls. And just through that and just having so much time there, they had developed a whole chain of command, and they had regulations and rules. And he basically threw out the rule book for that everyone was trained on, because it didn't work in an environment where I can torture you and break you immediately. He created another rule book that basically worked and allowed everyone to kind of make it through that process with their dignity intact, without compromising the mission and compromising the honor of the country. And make no mistake, at that point, the mission was survival. You know, the mission and the purpose of that POW colony was survival. He was in that environment for 7 years, They were never able to get him on camera, which their game was to basically torture you into the point where you would go and get in front of the camera and say, the United States is committing war crimes. And I beg the leaders to, abandon this criminal war effort. And they were never able to get him to do that. When they tried, he slashed his own face open. Like he was nuts. He was just extremely hard dude. The prison authority basically thought he was insane. But his approach rippled throughout the POW colony and basically increased everyone else's ability. Everyone kind of modeled themselves after him, and such that the Vietnamese really thought just the Americans, period, were just crazy and they couldn't. It was incomprehensible. Why are they behaving this way? But that a lot of the other prisoners credit their survival to his influence. And then this guy basically, after 7 years of this crap, returns home. Does he retire from the Navy and go on his book tour and all that? No, he stays in the Navy and continues on to become ultimately a vice admiral and the president of the Naval War College. And while he's the president of the Naval War College, that's whenever he starts, talking about this crazy old Roman philosopher named Epictetus. And everyone's like, what is the old man on about? Who was he talking about? What is he on about? And it turns out that he was, a lot of his just ability to endure, he credited to this philosopher. And you can find all that stuff is available online. Like you can read his essays and his lectures for free. They're on like the Naval Academy Ethics website and stuff like that. So, and it was like through that guy that I discovered this philosophy back when I was a youngin', back in the early 2000s. And so if I could meet one guy and sit down, have a conversation with him, I think it'd be him.
Okay. The last question is a real tough one. This year, what is the score going to be for the Army-Navy game?
I don't know. Navy's going to win. I'm supposed to say that. I've never been like this big Naval Academy dude or big Navy. Like don't go and tell anyone because the Naval Association is going to fast rope through my window, take it up in or something. I've never been like super gung ho Naval Academy. I've always been super gung ho. I'm just obnoxiously proud of being in the Navy, and the Academy was the most Navyist school I could find. Yeah. And I'm very proud to have gone there, but I'm specifically proud of it because it's my service and I absolutely love being a part of the Navy. I don't want to, go and have to get a real job. I'm just going to keep doing this until they make me stop.
Absolutely. Well, William, I'm going to bring it forward and give you the opportunity to tell everybody where your book's going to be released at and how they can follow you and learn all the good stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, you bet. If you could do me a favor and throw in the show notes just the link to the book. It's on Amazon. And all that. It releases on November 1, which by the time this airs, it won't be long from there. And I think by then it will already be released in the UK. There's going to be an audiobook. They found a guy who has a much smarter voice than me to read it. He doesn't have the same accent. Anyway, like we could throw links on there, but it's on Amazon. The book is called Stoicism as a Warrior Philosophy. I appreciate you letting me plug it here. The final thing I will leave your listeners with is a point from, I guess, my favorite, ancient philosopher is this guy named Cicero. And he made the point, Socrates had made the point that for something to be good, it must be both honorable and useful. Cicero expanded on that point to say, that which is not honorable is not useful, and that which is not useful is not honorable. Those two things work together. And that is a philosophy that I think applies to everything in life, is finding coherence, eliminating the incoherencies and the various things you're thinking and you're doing. And that is the path to doing right and to being happy. And so remember, that which is not honorable is not useful. That's what I'll leave you with.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I hope all of y'all got something out of this. If nothing else, you're going to get a book. So I'll hit that link, go buy the book, learn about it, and understand a lot of the stuff we talked about today goes hand in hand from one side of the military to the other. All of the units say we all have our same pride for the units we serve with, and we all like to give each other crap about where they're at. But at the end of the day, we're all brothers and sisters. So I hope all of y'all be safe, and don't forget, don't let the day kick your ass. Kick the day's ass.
It's